Commander Vela Zorax's hands gripped the controls of her ship as warning alarms blared throughout the command center. The vessel shuddered violently as another enemy blast struck the rear shields. Smoke filled the bridge, and the emergency lights cast an eerie red glow over the faces of her remaining crew members. "Status report," Vela ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Main engines at 30%, Commander. Shields failing. We cannot survive another direct hit," replied Myra, her navigation officer. The young Estrian's blue skin was pale with exhaustion after 3 days of continuous battle. Vela studied the tactical display. 5 Draxid warships pursued her small frigate, the Last Hope. Once, she had commanded a fleet of 30 ships and 10,000 crew members. Now, after 3 years of guerrilla warfare against the expanding Draxid Empire, she was down to the single vessel and a crew of 27. Refugees from conquered worlds. "Any response to our distress signal?" Vela asked, already knowing the answer. Communications Officer Zirn shook his head. "Nothing, Commander. The nearest Alliance outpost was destroyed last month." Vela closed her eyes briefly. She was the last surviving officer of the once mighty Galactic Alliance's 7th Fleet. The Alliance itself was in ruins, its member worlds falling one by one to the relentless Draxid war machine. "New contact," shouted Myra suddenly. "Uncharted system ahead. 3rd planet shows atmosphere and water. Pre-FTL civilization detected." Vala studied the readings. The blue-green world looked remarkably peaceful compared to the battle raging around. Her ship, the Draxid, wouldn't expect her to risk hiding near an inhabited planet. They knew the Alliance's strict non-interference protocols with developing worlds, but the Alliance was gone now, and Vela was out of options. "Plot a course for the 3rd planet," she ordered. "We'll use its gravity well to mask our signature, and lose our pursuers." "Commander, the indigenous life forms," began Zirn hesitantly. "I know the protocols," Vela cut him off, "but we have no choice. Prepare for atmospheric entry. Alert medical to secure all patients." The Last Hope changed course abruptly, accelerating toward the blue planet. The Draxid ships followed, their weapons charging for another barrage. "They're firing!" Mira shouted Dot. The ship rocked violently as energy beams tore through the weakened rear shields. Control panels exploded across the bridge. Vela was thrown from her command chair, her head striking the deck hard. Through blurred vision, she saw crew members scrambling to contain the damage. "Engine core breach imminent." Someone shouted. Vela pulled herself back to her station. "Emergency landing procedures. All crew to crash positions." The ship plummeted toward the planet's surface, its hull glowing red-hot as it tore through the atmosphere. Vela fought with the failing controls, trying to slow their descent enough to survive impact. "Attempting to stabilize," she muttered, more to herself than her crew. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly as the Last Hope tumbled through. Layers of clouds dot through the forward viewport. Vela glimpsed vast oceans, continents, and finally a huge expanse of green forest rushing up to meet them. She pulled back on the controls with all her strength, fighting to level their approach. "Brace for impact." She shouted. The Last Hope crashed through the forest canopy, ancient trees snapping like twigs against the ship's hull. The impact threw Vela against her restraints, knocking the breath from her lungs. Metal screamed as the ship carved a deep furrow through the forest floor before finally coming to rest in a clearing. For several minutes, Vela remained motionless, assessing her injuries. Her left arm was definitely broken, and a deep gash above. Her right eye leaked purple blood down her face. But she was alive. Slowly, painfully, she unstrapped herself and stood. The bridge was in ruins. Bodies lay scattered among the debris. Only Zirn showed signs of life, moaning softly from beneath a fallen support beam. "Zirn, report," she said, limping to his side and lifting the beam enough for him to crawl free. "Most systems?" "Destroyed," he gasped, clutching his sideware. A jagged piece of metal had pierced his environment suit. Life support failing. External atmosphere. Breathable, but higher oxygen content than our homeworld. Vila helped him to a sitting position. The others? Zirn's expression darkened. Medical Bay took a direct hit during the descent. Most of the wounded didn't make it. I estimate 7 survivors, including us 7 out of 27. Out of the 10,000 she had once commanded. Vela felt the weight of each loss like a physical burden. A new alarm cut through her thoughts. "Proximity alert," Zirn said, dragging himself to a damaged console. "Draxid scout ships entering the atmosphere. They're tracking our crash site." Of course they would follow. The Draxid never gave up a hunt, especially when their prey was wounded. Vela was more than just an enemy commander to them. She was a symbol. The last symbol of resistance to their empire. "How long do we have?" she asked. 20 minutes, maybe less, Zirn replied. Vila moved quickly, gathering whatever functional weapons she could find. Her personal plasma rifle was still attached to her command chair. She checked its charge half-power, enough for a decent fight. "We need to move the survivors into the forest," she told Zirn. "Set the core to overload. If the Draxid want this ship, they'll have to pay for it." Together, they managed to evacuate the 5 other survivors, all seriously injured, to a safe distance from the ship. Vela set up a hasty defensive position at the edge of the clearing, using fallen trees and debris as cover. "Commander," Zirn said softly as they worked, "we cannot win this fight." Vela checked her weapon again. "I know, but we will make them. Remember it." In the distance, she could hear the distinctive whine of Draxid dropships. They would deploy ground forces' first standard Draxid procedure for capturing high-value targets. They wanted her alive if possible. "Zirn, take the others and head deeper into the forest," she ordered. "I'll hold them here as long as I can." Zirn stared at her in shock. "Commander, no, we stay together." "That's an order," Vela said firmly. "Someone needs to survive, to warn this world about what's coming. The Draxid won't stop with me. Once they're here, they'll see this planet as a resource, to be exploited." Reluctantly, Zirn helped the other survivors retreat into the forest, leaving Vela alone at her defensive position. The first Draxid dropship appeared overhead, hovering menacingly before setting down at the far edge of the crash site, armored. Soldiers poured out, their insectoid forms moving with mechanical precision as they secured the area around the damaged Alliance vessel. Vala steadied her breathing, ignoring the pain from her broken arm. She had been fighting the Draxid for so long that facing them felt almost like coming home. If this was to be her last battle, she would make it count. The first squad of Draxid soldiers approached her position, weapons ready. Vela took aim at their leader and fired. Frank Miller was enjoying his morning coffee on the porch of his cabin when he saw the fiery streak across the sky. At first, he thought it might be a meteor, but the way it changed direction before disappearing behind the tree line told him. It was something else entirely. When the ground shook moments later, he knew whatever had crashed was Big Frank set down his cup and went inside to change. The former Marine had been working as a forest ranger in these woods for 5 years now, preferring the quiet solitude to the noise of city life. He had seen his share of small plane crashes over the years, and his training kicked in automatically. He grabbed his emergency backpack first aid supplies, water, rope, flashlight, and basic tools. After a moment's hesitation, he also took his hunting rifle. Something about that object's controlled descent didn't sit right with him. 20 minutes later, Frank was hiking through the dense forest, following the trail of broken trees. When he heard the strange, high-pitched whine overhead, he instinctively took cover beneath a large pine. A craft unlike anything he had ever seen passed overhead, sleek, angular, with no visible propellers or jet engines. It was definitely not from any Air Force he recognized. What the hell? He muttered to himself as he watched it descend in the direction of the crash site. Frank moved more cautiously now, staying low and using the trees for cover. As he got closer, he began to hear sounds that made his combat instincts flare, the unmistakable rhythm of weapons fire, though with a strange electric quality he didn't recognize. The forest opened into a newly formed clearing where a massive gash had been torn through the earth. At one end lay what could only be described as a spaceship, its metallic hull still smoking from entry into the atmosphere. But what caught Frank's attention was the firefight happening at the edge of the clearing. A lone figure, clearly not human, was firing from behind fallen trees at what looked like a squad of armored soldiers. These soldiers moved with an odd, jerky motion, their armor resembling an insect's carapace. Their weapons fired beams of energy that scorched the earth and trees. Wherever they hit, the lone defender was clearly losing ground. Even as Frank watched, their position was flanked by two of the armored soldiers. In moments, they would be surrounded. Frank had no idea what he was witnessing. Aliens? Some secret military project? It didn't matter. His instincts told him which side he should be on, the outnumbered one. He raised his rifle, took aim at one of the flanking soldiers, and fired. Bullet struck the armored carapace with a spark, but seemed to do little damage. However, it did get their attention. Both soldiers turned toward Frank's position, giving the lone defender a chance to retreat. Frank fired again, aiming for what he hoped was a joint in the strange armor. This time, the soldier stumbled. Encouraged, Frank continued firing, forcing the soldiers to take cover. He saw the lone defender looking in his direction, humanoid figure with blue-tinted skin and silvery eyes that widened in surprise at the sight of him. One of the defender's arms hung uselessly at their side. Clearly broken. Frank gestured frantically for them to move toward him while he provided covering fire. After a moment's hesitation, the alien fighter seemed to understand, retreating in a crouching run toward Frank's position. More energy beams sliced through the air around them as the alien reached Frank's side. Up close, Frank could see that the alien was female, at least in appearance. Her uniform was torn and bloodied with a strange purple fluid, and her breathing was labored. "We need to move," Frank said, knowing she probably couldn't understand him, but hoping his tone conveyed the urgency. To his surprise, she nodded, then pointed deeper into the forest. She spoke words in a language unlike any Frank had ever heard. Musical and complex. They retreated together, Frank firing occasionally to discourage pursuit. The alien warrior matched his pace despite her injuries, and he noted with approval that she chose her path with tactical awareness, using the terrain for maximum cover. After about a mile, they came to a small stream. The alien held up her hand, signaling him to stop. She leaned against a tree, catching her breath, then looked at Frank with an expression he could only interpret as cautious gratitude. She pointed to herself. "Vila," she said clearly. Frank understood. "Frank," he replied, pointing to himself. Nodded, then reached for a device at her belt. It was damaged, with exposed wiring and a cracked display, but when she pressed a button, it emitted a soft hum. "Thank you," she said after a moment, her voice accented but the words clearly English. "For helping. Not expected." Frank blinked in surprise. "You speak English?" Vila gestured to the device. "Universal translator. Damaged. Basic communication. Only. What are those things back there?" Frank asked, gesturing back toward the crash site. "Draxid soldiers. Empire. Conquerors." Vila's face hardened. "They hunt me, last commander of Alliance. Frank tried to process this information. Aliens were real. There was an empire of them. And apparently, some kind of interstellar war was happening. Why are they after you specifically? He asked. Vila touched a symbol on her uniform. I fight 3 years after fleet destroyed. Symbol of resistance. She looked at him with intensity. They will not stop. Will find me. Will find your world too. A sound in the distance made them both tense, the high whine of the strange aircraft. More come, Vila said grimly. Need safe place. Repair translator. Plan. Frank thought quickly. His cabin was about 2 miles away. Isolated, well stocked with supplies, and with a root cellar that could serve as a hiding place if needed. I have a place, he said. But we need to move fast. Vela checked her weapon and advanced looking. Rifle that hummed with energy. More Draxid will land soon. Search patterns. Efficient hunters. Frank nodded. Can you travel? You're injured. Vila straightened, wincing slightly. I continue. Must warn others of my crew. Escaped into forest. There are more of you? Frank asked. Few. All injured. Zirn leads them. She pointed in a direction slightly east of their current position. Frank made a quick decision. Let's find your people first, and head to my cabin. Safety in numbers. As they moved through the forest, Frank tried to process everything that had happened in the last hour. His quiet life as a forest ranger had just been completely upended. He was now apparently involved in some kind of alien conflict, yet strangely, he felt more alive than he had in years. The familiar focus of combat, the clarity of having a mission, it awakened something in him that had been dormant since he left the Marines. Vela moved with the practiced caution of a seasoned warrior. Despite her injuries, Frank found himself respecting her resilience. Whatever species she was, she clearly had the same kind of training and experience he did. Your weapon, Vila said suddenly, gesturing to his rifle. Primitive. Projectile? Frank nodded. Standard hunting rifle. Nothing. Fancy. Vila's expression was unreadable. Surprised it penetrated Draxid armor. Your world's technology, not advanced. Sometimes the simple solutions work best, Frank replied with a slight smile. For the first time, Vila's serious expression softened slightly. Perhaps Alliance forgot this, too dependent on advanced technology. They fell silent as they approached a dense thicket. Vela made a soft, trilling sound that didn't seem possible from a human throat. After a moment, a similar sound responded from within the thicket. Vila relaxed visibly. My crew, they survive. As they approached, Frank got his first look at the other survivors of the crash. 5 aliens, all different from Velasum, with extra limbs, unusual skin colors, or features that seemed both familiar and utterly foreign. One of them, with greenish skin and 4 eyes, approached Vela and spoke rapidly in their language. Vela responded, gesturing to Frank several times. Finally, she turned to Frank. This Zirn, my communications officer. She paused, searching for words. You help us. We grateful. But now you in danger too. The trek to Frank's cabin was slow and difficult. 2 of Vila's crew members could barely walk, and everyone took turns supporting them. Frank led the way, constantly checking for signs of pursuit. The forest he knew so well now felt alien and dangerous. By sunset, they reached the small clearing where Frank's cabin stood. It was a simple 2-bedroom structure he had built mostly by himself, with a large porch and a root cellar beneath. Nothing fancy, but right now it was the safest place on Earth for this group of extraterrestrial refugees. Inside quickly, Frank sighed, holding the door open as the aliens filed past him. Vela entered last, her weapon still ready. Draxid will track us here eventually, she said, her voice clearer now as she adjusted her translator. Need to prepare defenses. Frank nodded. First, let's tend to the wounded. He gathered his first aid supplies, though he had no idea if human medicine would help alien physiology. Vela seemed to understand his concern. Basic care only, she advised. Clean wounds, support breaks. Our bodies heal differently, but principles similar. Frank worked alongside Vela and Zirn, cleaning purple, blue, and green blood from various injuries. One crew member, a small being with 6 limbs and silvery skin named Liro, had a serious chest wound. Frank could tell from Vela's expression that Liro might not survive the night as darkness fell. Frank prepared a simple meal for himself and offered his food stores to the aliens. Zirn examined everything carefully before identifying several items the crew could safely eat. Your biology's similar to Astrian in some ways, Zirn explained, referring to Vela's species. Carbon-based, different proteins, but some compatible. After everyone had eaten, Frank spread maps of the forest across his kitchen table. We need to plan, he said. How many of these Draxid do you think will come after you? Vela studied this maps with a tactical eye. Initial force was small scout team. Now they know we survived and have human help. They will send more. She pointed to the crash site on the map. They establish base there. Use ship wreckage. Start search patterns. How? Long until they find us? Frank asked. 2 days. Maybe 3, Vela replied. Depends on search technology they brought. Frank ran a hand through his hair. I should contact someone. The authorities. The military. Zirn made a sound that might have been a laugh. Your world's military not ready for Draxid technology. Would be massacre. So what do we do? Frank asked. Vela straightened, wincing at her injured arm. We need to repair communication device from ship. Send warning to any alliance forces that might still exist. She looked at Frank with her silvery eyes. And prepare your world for what comes. A knock at the door made everyone freeze. Vela raised her weapon, and Frank grabbed his rifle. He motioned for the aliens to move to the back rooms, then approached the door cautiously. Frank, you in there? It's Susan Porter from down the road. Frank relaxed slightly, but remained alert. Susan was his nearest neighbor, though near meant 5 miles in these woods. She was a doctor who had left her big city practice for a quieter life, much like Frank had. He opened the door just enough to see her. Susan, this isn't a good time. Susan looked concerned. I saw something crash in the forest earlier today. Then military helicopters flying over. Is everything okay? Frank hesitated. He needed to get rid of her quickly, but Susan had medical training that could be invaluable. Making a split-second decision, he opened the door wider. Susan, I need you to promise me you'll keep calm and quiet about what I'm about to show you. Susan's eyes widened as she stepped inside and saw Vela standing in the hallway, plasma rifle in hand. Oh my God, she whispered. We need your help. Frank said simply. To Susan's credit, she recovered quickly. Her doctor's instincts took over as she saw the injured aliens. What happened to them? She asked, already moving toward Liro, who was breathing with difficulty. Crash landing? Frank explained briefly. They're being hunted by others of, well, not their kind exactly. Hostiles. Susan examined Liro with professional detachment, though her hands trembled slightly. I don't know their anatomy, but this one has a punctured lung or something similar. I can try to help if they'll let me. Vela approached cautiously. You are healer? Susan startled at Vela's use of English. I'm a doctor, yes. Please help Liro. Vela said. Others need care too. Susan looked at Frank. I need my medical bag from my car. And I have some equipment at my cabin that might help. It's dangerous, Frank warned. The ones hunting them might be watching. I'm already involved. Susan replied firmly. I'll be quick. While Susan returned to her car, Vela pulled Frank aside. More humans involved means more risk, she said. Susan's a doctor. Your people need medical attention I can't provide, Frank argued, and we need all the help we can get. Vela considered this, then nodded. Your judgment. But security compromised. Now, when Susan returned, she worked for hours treating the injured aliens. Her medical training allowed her to adapt to their unusual physiologies better than Frank had managed. By midnight, even Lero was resting more comfortably. I've done what I can, Susan said, washing alien blood from her hands in Frank's kitchen sink. But they need better care than I can provide with what I have here. Thank you, Vela said sincerely. She had been watching Susan work with interest and respect. Now, Susan said, sitting down at the kitchen table, someone needs to tell me. Exactly what's going on. Frank and Vela exchanged glances. Zirn joined them, carrying a device salvaged from the crash. Translator working better now, Zirn said. Can explain properly. Over the next hour, they told Susan everything about the Galactic Alliance, the Draxid Empire, the fall of Vela's fleet, and their desperate crash landing on Earth. The Draxid won't stop with capturing us, Vela explained. Once they find your world, they will see it as resource to exploit. Humans would be enslaved or eliminated. Susan paled but remained composed. Why haven't they attacked Earth before now? Your solar system at edge of explored space, Zirn explained. No valuable resources detected by long-range scans. Not worth attention until now. But we brought them here, Vela added, her voice heavy with regret. Now your world in danger because of us. Double quotes. Frank leaned forward. So what's our next move? Need to warn your authorities, Vela said, but carefully. Some human governments might try to capture us, study our technology. And we need to prepare. Defenses, Zirn added. Draxid will find us eventually. Susan had been quiet, processing everything. Now she spoke up. I have a friend, Grant Kelly. He works for the government's some kind of scientific research division. He's a good man. I trust him. Can you contact him without alerting others? Vila asked. Susan nodded. We have a private way of communicating. He can help us approach the right people. Frank stood up and checked his rifle. That's for tomorrow. Tonight, we need to set up a watch rotation and secure the perimeter. He looked at Vela. Can you show me how your weapons work? Mine barely scratched their armor. Vela nodded and picked up her plasma rifle. Basic principles simple. We'll teach you. As Susan made calls to arrange coverage for her patients, and Zirn worked on repairing salvaged equipment, Frank and Vela stepped onto the porch to discuss defense strategies. The night was clear, stars twinkling overhead. Vela looked up at them with longing. Somewhere up there, Alliance remnants still fight, she said softly. If any survive, Frank followed her gaze. You'll find them again. Vela turned to him. First, we survived Draxid. You fight well, for primitive human. Frank caught the slight humor in her tone. And you're not bad yourself for an advanced alien. 4. The first time since they met, Vela smiled an expression surprisingly similar to a human's. In that moment, despite their different origins, Frank recognized a kindred spirit, a warrior like himself. We begin training at dawn, Vela said. Turning serious again. Draxid coming. We must be ready. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Frank woke early, having slept only a few hours during his watch shift. He found Vela on the porch, her eyes scanning the forest edge with practiced vigilance. Any sign of them? He asked quietly. Vela shook. Her head. Not yet, but they come. She handed him a small device that looked like a wristwatch. Communication device. Modified from parts Zirn salvaged. Keep it on you. Frank strapped it to his wrist. Thanks. What's the plan for today? Susan? Left at dawn to contact her government friend, Vela explained. Ziern works on repairing ship components. I teach you Draxid tactics. Inside the cabin, the mood was tense but focused. Lero was improving under Susan's treatment from the night before. The other aliens were either resting or helping Ziern with repairs. After a quick breakfast, Vela led Frank into the forest behind the cabin. She carried her plasma rifle and a small pack of equipment. Draxid soldiers fight in units of 5, she explained as they walked. Linked neural networks. They think as one. Their strength is coordination. And their weakness? Frank asked. Adaptation. Creative thinking. Vela stopped in a small clearing. They follow patterns, protocols. Break pattern, confuse them. She unfolded a small projector from her pack and activated it. A holographic image of a Draxid soldier appeared, rotating slowly in the air. Frank studied it carefully. Armor weak at joints, Vela pointed out. Neck connection. Underarms. Behind knees. She switched the image to show a Draxid weapon. Energy weapons. Powerful but slow to recharge between bursts. Count 5 seconds. For the next few hours, Vela trained Frank on Draxid technology, tactics, and weaknesses. She modified his hunting rifle with a small attachment from her own weapon. Amplifies. Impact, she explained. Still primitive, but now can penetrate armor at weak points. Frank was a quick study. His marine training had prepared him well, and he adapted quickly to fighting an alien enemy. By midday, they had set up a series of traps around the cabin perimeter, nothing high-tech, just simple snares and pitfalls, but positioned according to Vala's knowledge of Draxid search patterns. They were heading back to the cabin when Frank's new wrist communicator buzzed. Ziern's voice came through, urgent and clear. Return immediately. Susan has returned with news. When they reached the cabin, they found Susan sitting at the kitchen table with a laptop computer. She looked up as they entered, her face grave. I contacted Grant, she said. He's on his way, but there's something you need to see. She turned the laptop to face them. On the screen was a news website showing blurry photos of what appeared to be the crash site, surrounded by military vehicles. The headline read, Unidentified aircraft crash, military quarantine established. They're calling it a chemical spill to keep people away, Susan explained. But social media is already full of people who saw the crash. Some even caught glimpses of the Draxid ships. Vela leaned closer to the screen. Your government knows? They know something crashed, Susan said. But according to Grant, they think it's experimental technology from another country. They don't understand what they're dealing with. Frank rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. How long until your friend gets here? A few hours. He's flying in from Washington. Susan scrolled down the page. There's more. Reports of strange lights in the sky last night. More Draxid ships? Ziern, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. Reinforcements. As expected. Vela's expression darkened. They will establish forward base at crash site. Begin wider search. As if to confirm her words, a distant rumble shook. The cabin slightly. Everyone moved to the windows. On the horizon, above where the crash site would be, dark smoke rose into the sky. They're destroying evidence, Vela said. Standard procedure? Frank turned to face the group. We need to move. This cabin is too exposed. Susan nodded. I know a place. My friend Grant owns a hunting lodge about 20 miles north of here. It's remote, well-stocked, and has a basement level partially built into a hillside. More defensible. Than this, can we transport all the wounded? Frank asked. My vehicle can carry 4 passengers, Susan said. But we'll need another for the rest. Frank thought for a moment. I have an old truck in the shed. It's not pretty, but it runs. They quickly formed a plan. Susan would take the most severely. injured aliens in her SUV. Frank would drive the others in his truck. They would meet at the hunting lodge to await Grant's arrival. As they packed essential supplies, Vela worked with Zirn to salvage what they could from the repaired ship components. Need this communication array, Vela insisted, carefully wrapping a delicate-looking device. May be able to contact any Alliance ships in nearby systems. Frank was checking his weapons when his wrist communicator suddenly emitted a series of rapid beeps. Vela's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Proximity alert," she said. "Draxid scouts approaching." Everyone froze. Frank moved to the window and carefully peered out. At first, he saw nothing but the familiar forest. Then, a movement caught his eye, something metallic, reflecting sunlight between the trees. "I count 2, he said quietly. About 300 yards out, moving slowly. Vela joined him at the window. "Scout pair. Looking for heat signatures. Technology signals." She turned to Zirn. "Shut down all equipment. Now." Zirn quickly moved through the cabin, powering down the alien devices they had been using. The injured crew members were helped into the back rooms, away from windows. "What's the play?" Frank asked Vela. "We can't move everyone quickly enough to avoid them." Vela checked her weapon. "Need to eliminate scouts before they report our position." Frank nodded. "I'll go left, you go right. Pincer movement." "No," Vela said firmly. "Together. Safer." Frank was about to argue when Susan spoke up. "I can help too." "I'm a good shot." Frank looked at her in surprise. Susan shrugged. "Country doctor. Hunting is how I feed myself out here." Vela considered, then nodded. 3 approaches better. Susan. "From here, provide covering fire. Frank and I circle behind." They quickly prepared, Frank giving Susan his spare hunting rifle, while he took the one modified by Vela. They slipped out the back door while the Draxid scouts were still approaching. From the front, the forest was quiet as Frank and Vela moved through it, staying low and using the trees for cover. Years of hunting had made Frank nearly silent in these woods, and he was impressed to see that Vela matched his stealth despite being from another world. They circled wide, coming around behind the Draxid scouts. Now Frank could see them clearly, too. Armored figures moving with mechanical precision, scanning the forest with handheld devices. Vela signaled to Frank, with hand gestures that were surprisingly similar to those he had learned in the Marines. 3 fingers, on count of 3. 2 fingers. Take the one on the right. 1 finger. Aim for the neck joint. Frank nodded his understanding. They raised their weapons in unison. Vela counted down with her fingers. 3, 2, 1. They fired simultaneously. Frank's modified rifle made a different sound than usual, and he felt a slight vibration as it discharged. His shot struck the Draxid scout exactly at the neck joint, and the alien soldier dropped immediately. Vela's shot took down the second scout, but not before it emitted a high-pitched electronic squeal, a distress signal. "We need to move," Vela said urgently. "Now." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of movement and tension. After eliminating the Draxid scouts, the group had rushed to evacuate Frank's cabin. They barely made it out before a larger Draxid force arrived, their ships darkening the scent. Sky above the forest, now they were gathered at Grant Kelly's hunting lodge, a sturdy 2-story building nestled against a rocky hillside. The basement level, partially built into the hill, provided excellent protection and was currently serving as their command center. Grant himself had arrived the previous evening, a serious man in his 40s, with military bearing and quick, intelligent eyes. He had taken the existence of aliens remarkably well. 20 years in special projects research teaches you to expect the unexpected, he had explained to Frank. Besides, the evidence was pretty convincing. Grant had brought supplies, weapons, and most importantly, a secure satellite communication system that allowed him to contact certain government officials without going through normal channels. "I've briefed a select group," Grant told them as they gathered around a table covered with maps and technical diagrams. "People I trust who have the authority to act. They're mobilizing a response team, but it will take time, maybe another day. We may not have a day," Vela said, studying the map. She pointed to several locations where Draxid activity had been spotted. "They're establishing a perimeter, searching methodically." Ziern, who had been working tirelessly on the salvaged communication array, looked up from his work. "Device almost operational. May be able to send distress signal to any Alliance ships in range." "And if there aren't any?" Susan asked the question everyone was thinking. Vela's expression remained stoic. "Then we fight with what we have." The hunting lodge had been transformed into a fortress over the past day. Windows were barricaded, tripwires set around the perimeter, and improvised weapons positioned at strategic points. Frank, Susan, and Grant had been joined by two more humans Grant's security team, who had arrived that morning. Lero and the other injured aliens were recovering well under Susan's care. Even Lero was now able to stand and wanted to help with the defenses. "Need every fighter," Lero had insisted in broken English, the translator still struggling with his unique vocal patterns. As night fell, Frank joined Vela on the lodge's rooftop observation post. The sky was clear, stars twinkling overhead, deceptively peaceful. "Your friend Grant is impressive," Vela said as Frank settled beside her. "Adapts quickly. Good tactical mind," Frank nodded. "He reminds me of some of my commanders in the Marines. People who can think clearly in a crisis." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, scanning the darkened forest for any sign of movement. Over the past few days, a strange bond had formed between them, warriors from different worlds united by a common enemy and a shared purpose. "If we survive this," Frank said finally, "what will you do? Try to find what's left of your alliance?" Vela was quiet for a moment. "Yes, rebuild if possible." She turned to look at him. "Your world now involved will need protection. Alliance could provide technology, knowledge." "An alliance with the Alliance," Frank said with a small smile. Vela's expression softened slightly, the closest she came to smiling. "Yes." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from below. "Vela, Frank, Ziern has something." They hurried down to the basement, where Ziern was hunched over the communication array, his four eyes wide with excitement. "Signal detected," he exclaimed. "Alliance signature. Ship in nearby system responding to distress call." The room erupted in hopeful murmurs. Vela leaned over the array, studying the incoming transmission. "Cruiser-class vessel," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "Captain Cora commanding. She was my second officer before we were separated in battle 2 years ago." "How long until they can reach us?" Grant asked. Ziern calculated quickly. "At maximum speed, 12 hours. "That's cutting it close," Frank said. "The Draxid will find us before then." As if to confirm his words, one of Grant's security team rushed into the room. Movement in the forest. Multiple signatures approaching from the north. Everyone moved with practiced efficiency. Weapons were distributed, positions assigned. The 5 humans and 6 aliens prepared to defend the lodge against the approaching Draxid force. "How many?" Vela asked as they gathered at the front windows. "At least 30, replied Grant's security officer. "And 2 of those hover transports." Frank checked his modified rifle. "Remember the training. Target joint sections. Use the terrain to break up their formations." The first sign of the Draxid was the eerie glow of their weapons in the darkness. Then came the sound of rhythmic marching that seemed too precise to be natural. "They know we're here," Vela said. "No attempt at stealth." Grant keyed his satellite. "Phone. Reinforcements are 2 hours out." Air support being scrambled now. Vila nodded. We hold until then. The first attack came suddenly, a barrage of energy blasts that lit up the night and shook the lodge. The defenders returned fire from protected positions, their weapons now all modified with Zirn's enhancements to penetrate Draxid armor. The battle quickly intensified. The Draxid pressed forward with methodical determination, while the defenders used every trick and trap they had prepared. Frank and Vila fought side by side, their movements perfectly coordinated, as if they had been fighting together for years instead of days. Susan proved to be an excellent shot, calmly picking off Draxid soldiers from an upper window. Grant and his team maintained a steady defense of the main entrance, while Zirn continued to communicate with the approaching Alliance ship. Despite their efforts, the Draxid gradually advanced. Their superior numbers began to tell, and one by one, the outer defenses fell. Fall back to the basement level, Vila ordered when the front door finally gave way under Draxid weapons fire. The defenders retreated in good order, moving to their secondary positions in the basement. Here, the narrow stairway created a bottleneck that negated the Draxid numerical advantage. Frank took position at the top of the stairs, his rifle braced against the wall. Vila stood beside him, her plasma weapon humming with energy. Just like old times, Frank said with grim humor. What old times? Vila asked. Future old times, Frank replied. When we tell this story years from now. Vila gave him a curious look, then nodded in understanding. Yes, future old times. The first Draxid appeared at the top of the stairs and was immediately cut down by their combined fire. More followed, pressing forward despite their losses. For every one that fell, another took its place. The battle continued for what seemed like hours, but was probably only minutes. Frank lost track of time, focused entirely on the rhythm of aim, fire, reload. Beside him, Vila fought with the precision and skill of a warrior who had spent her life in battle. Then everything changed. A deafening roar shook the building, and the Draxid attack faltered. Through the basement windows, they could see new lights in the sky, not the cold blue of Draxid ships, but the warm white and red of human aircraft. Air support has arrived. Grant shouted. The Draxid began to retreat, their formation breaking for the first time. Outside, the sound of helicopter gunships and jets filled the air, along with the distinctive crack of human military weapons. Frank and Vela exchanged looks of cautious hope. The tide was turning. Zirn's voice came urgently from the communications. Station. Vela. Alliance ship has arrived ahead of schedule. They're engaging Draxid vessels in orbit. For the next hour, they listened to reports of the battle raging above them. Grant's government contacts had mobilized faster than expected, and combined with the arrival of Captain Cora's Alliance cruiser, they had caught the Draxid fleet by surprise. By dawn, it was over. The remaining Draxid forces had retreated from Earth, their mission commander killed in the fighting at the lodge. Grant's superior officers arrived to secure the area and meet with Vela and her crew. As the sun rose over the forest, Frank found Vela standing outside, looking up at the sky, where, invisible to the naked eye, an Alliance cruiser now orbited Earth. It's not over, she said as he joined her. The Draxid will return with a larger force when they learn what happened here. Then we'll be ready, Frank replied. Earth and your Alliance, together. Vila turned to him. My crew and I will need to return to Alliance space eventually, help rebuild. Frank nodded, feeling a strange reluctance at the thought of her leaving. And I'll need to help prepare Earth for what's coming. Perhaps, Vila said carefully, we could do both. Earth needs an Alliance representative. Alliance needs someone who understands humans. Frank smiled slowly. A joint mission? Yes, Vila. Agreed, and this time she did smile, a full, genuine smile that transformed her face. No longer battling alone. Frank looked back at the lodge, where humans and aliens worked together in the aftermath of battle. Then up to the sky, where a new future was taking shape. "United we stand?" he said simply. Vila nodded. "United we stand,"